after the roll call, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You all set?
Make sure you kick off the YouTube.
Somebody's got their.
Yeah, I know. We have another speaker.
There's another speaker on
All
this.
set?
Oh, I've got YouTube on.
Once again, Gorski's not a delegate.
No, I know.
But he's
But you're on
electronically
standby.
attending, just
Yeah.
like last week.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and before we go, we're going to stand for the national anthem. Okay, thank you. That's a little different, and we haven't done that for a while. It's nice to see we're doing it. Closed meeting report, Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier this evening, council met in closed session to discuss two proposed acquisitions of land, and they did this as permitted to do so under section 239(2)(c) of the Municipal Act. And at that meeting, council did give direction with respect to those two potential acquisitions. And that's the extent of my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Rob. Is there any conflict of interest amongst council members here tonight? Seeing none?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, under adoption of published agenda, I do have one amendment to speak to this evening. Specifically, item 5.1, adoption of the regular council minutes from September 21st. Specifically, item 17.2.3 from those minutes, resolution R2009-359 should reference the mover as being Councillor Bondi and the seconder as being Deputy Mayor Meloche. So just looking for adoption of published agenda with that amendment.
Could I get a mover, please, on the change? Deputy Mayor Meloche and Councillor Bjorkman. All in favor? Carrie, thank you. Go ahead, Rob.
5.2 on the agenda, the August 24th, 2020 regular council meeting revised minutes. That council approves an amendment as noted to the August 24th regular council meeting minutes to include a revision to agenda item 15.1.2, re Mayor Snively's notice of motion on the hunting license review, and that the said minutes be adopted as revised.
Have a mover, please, on that one, Councillor Bowman, and need a seconder, please. Councillor Verbeek, any questions? All in favor? Carried, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, coming back as unfinished business this evening is Bylaw 1950, being a bylaw regulating the erection of signs in the town of Essex. At the September 21st regular council meeting, council's proposed resolution to give 3 readings to Bylaw 1950. And this was resolution R2009-357, as moved by Councillor Bowman, seconded by Councillor Vanderdolen. This motion to give 3 readings was tabled pursuant to resolution R2009-359. It was tabled to this evening's council meeting. And with respect to that, Mr. Mayor, in order for council to give consideration, we would require a motion to take that resolution R2009-357, which included a request for a recorded vote, would require council to take that from the table for discussion.
Pleasure of council. What would you like here? Council? Nobody wants to respond to this one? Councillor Guerin, go ahead.
Yeah, are we able to speak to this right now, or do we need a motion, a seconder, and then speak to it?
You got to bring it from the table. So are you willing to bring it from the table? I'm sure you are. If you want to speak on it.
Yeah, I am. I'm
Okay.
willing to bring it.
Okay. Councillor Bowman's the seconder. Okay, all in favor of that? Carried. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Guerin.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, first. So now that resolution R2009-357 has been taken from the table, it is now before council. In addition, though, in conjunction, we have planning report 2020-26, which is an administration report for council's information purposes this evening, read the crew sign bylaw amendment. So we have that before council as well, Mr. Mayor, and our Director of Development Services, I believe, will be looking at some point to speak to this.
Okay. Councillor Guerin, did you want Lori to speak on this first, or did you want to speak first? Let Lori speak first?
Yeah, through you, Lori can speak first, sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so we're here to make a decision, and we're here also to just go over a couple of details. So I thought I would take you to of the planning report that's on council's agenda. If we refer to page 39 of 207.
I can't do both.
Okay, no problem. You know what, that's okay. I'll just go through those points. Okay, so on page 39, if council has the agenda maybe on a different screen, I'll just go through that. Some of the questions that were posed at the last council meeting were in reference to the site-specific bylaw that was presented for council's adoption. Some of the questions that were asked were related to, in summary, the hours of operation, the lighted sign component, and the height. So I would like to go through, if I could, those particular topics. So Okay, so the hours of the operation for the lighted sign area include instances of special, or do the hours of operation for the lighted sign area include instances of special events? So administration did note during our meeting on September 8th, or rather September 21st, that the lighted sign could be used during winery business hours.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Mayor. I have to say that people cannot hear Miss Chadwick.
Okay, just,
I agree.
Thank you.
Is this better?
is that better, Counselor?
I need to hear her talk a little bit more.
Okay, how's this, Councilor Bonnie?
I think that's a lot better.
It's only faintly better, and someone in the background is coughing with an open mic on.
Okay, hold on one second, Council. Or come up here and I'll sit over there so you can explain everything right here. Okay, so you're close. I'll sit over there for now. Okay, come on up here. So you stay there. Okay. Just hold on, Council. We're gonna try to fix this. So if you can get a little closer to the mic, just hold on. Go ahead, speak a little louder, Lori. See.
Can everyone hear me now? Can you hear me?
It's better.
Council, can you hear me okay?
How about now?
How about now? Council? Hello? Can you hear me?
It's not perfect, but it's better.
Better?
It sounds like you're still 20 feet from a microphone.
Just hold on, Council. We're gonna correct it right now.
Okay, now try it.
How's this, Council?
Can you hear now?
How's this, Council?
Same. You can hear you, but it's not super good.
How's this?
You're still a long way from a microphone.
Well, she's only a foot. Okay.
How's this?
I mean, I can hear you.
Okay. How about we give it a shot? Mr.
Yes.
Mayor? Okay, all right, let's give it a shot. Okay, so thanks for your patience. If I can proceed with the question that was posed last meeting pertaining to the hours of operation for the lighted sign. So administration noted at the time that the intent of the bylaw was to allow for the operation of that lighted sign during winery business hours only. And this would include special events such as weddings or other events, charitable events as well. So it is important to note that interior and exterior areas for private receptions form part of the function of a business as defined in our zoning bylaw. The next question that was posed during our last meeting was, could messaging for offsite events or businesses be displayed in the lighted sign area? And the answer to that is that administration stated that the bylaw rather would allow for the identification of on-site or off-site charitable events. This is what is permitted currently for any ground sign under bylaw 1350. The next question that was posed at the last meeting was related to the height of the sign. And this I would like to clarify for not only for council, but also for members of the public. There was quite a bit of discussion surrounding that. And so I would be happy to help assist with those questions in more than what's in front of us in the report. Administration stated that the height is measured from the ground. We did confuse that with grade. So I do want to clarify, in accordance to our sign bylaw, in accordance to that current bylaw, not site specifically, but rather that entire sign bylaw that applies to the entire town of Essex, the measurement of height for any sign is measured from the ground immediately below the sign to the highest point of the sign above the ground. It's also important to note that any berm that is built, the sign height is taken from that top of the berm to the top of the sign. The maximum, it's important to note, the maximum height of any berm in the municipality is to be no higher than 39 inches. This is in reference to our fill bylaw. And so this particular berm that Mr. Gorski, or the applicant rather, is proposing meets the bylaw for the height of a berm and is proposed to be no higher than 22 inches high. The next question that was posed was related to the number of lines or any lines in the sign. We stated at the last meeting, and we can state that again tonight, that the proponent has noted that the sign face area, the lighted sign area, will be no larger than 50% of the area of the entire sign. The lighted sign area can be used for the display of a message, and it can be used for one word, one line, or however many lines that the sign face area can fit. The next question was related to, is there a limit on the level of illumination or brightness for the lighted sign area? Administration noted that the bylaw does not include regulations concerning illumination level currently or brightness, because it would be difficult to enforce. We've since noted that, we have since investigated this further. However, similar to what we said at the last meeting, by limiting the exposure of the lighted sign to business hours only, our intent was to limit the exposure onto neighboring properties. So that is still the case here with this particular bylaw. Following that discussion, we did take it back to administration, not only through the planning division, but we also looked from a bylaw enforcement matter. We looked at our building division, building and bylaw enforcement, and we took a look at these particular provisions related to illumination. So based on our research, administration has thoroughly reviewed for the past couple of weeks that site specifically, there would be concerns with imposing a site-specific regulation for illumination without a proper municipal-wide review of the bylaw and amendments to all lighted signs in the town. So currently, our sign bylaw does not have illumination regulations. It would be very difficult, and it would pose some concerns if we were to impose them site-specifically. However, should council proceed to have administration take a look at illumination levels municipal-wide, we would be happy to do so. And we would bring forward amendments for the entire sign bylaw forward for council's consideration. And if council does direct us to do that, it would take effect and it would allow us to enforce lighted sign throughout the entire municipality, and it would not limit us to only one property. We did take a look at certain applications and meters that are available, and as our report indicates, there are opportunities out there. However, certain applications, if we were to impose something today, for example, a smartphone application, it may not be reliable and or accurate for measurement. There are meters available that do measure. However, similar to a radar detector, the device would need to be calibrated, certified, and each person using that device would require proper training, and as well as potential in-house or third-party resources to assist with the advisory behind such a meter and such a regulation. Implementing, of course, a standardized process would also be quite important to us if we were to go down that route. So advisory services to establish those distances as well would also be important for measuring the distance between illumination to a sensitive land use, as well as the time of day for benchmarks and consistent readings. OPP would be required to enforce illumination after regular town business hours, and therefore would require that appropriate training and to work in tandem with our enforcement team. Finally, tickets for infractions may not be defendable in court at this time. Other lights in the area may interfere with meters and therefore could result in higher readings for any sign or for this site-specific sign than what would normally be generated if it was the only light source. So in conclusion, based on our review, based on the responses that you hear tonight, as well as in formally in the report, we have not proposed any further amendments to the site-specific bylaw as it was presented at the last council meeting. We've also attached for your reference all of the reports dating back from January 2020, including the public meeting presentation when administration presented the results of the sign bylaw review municipal-wide. So we're here for any further questions. I do also have on standby our manager of planning services, Rita Jabour, as well as our manager of bylaw enforcement and chief building official, Kevin Carter.
Thank you, Lori. I'll open it up to council. Any questions to Lori or Rita or Kevin from council? Deputy Mayor Malash, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, your worship. So I'm looking at page 85 of our agenda. I'll give people time to get there. But this is a page out of the report that our manager of planning, Rita Jabour, issued to us and to the public in regard to this particular sign. And this was back on August the 4th. And I'm just going to read a page out of what she's said to us here. And I just want to make sure that this still stands. The applicant's proposing to utilize the electric display for the display of a digital static message indicating hours of operation only. The sign is proposed to be automatically set to turn on at 10 a.m. and turn off at 6 p.m. with a black background and either green or yellow or red letters. And there's an example on the page that says open 11 to 6. The letters are white and it's on a background. And this is the proposed lighted sign. It further states that an electronic media sign is defined as a sign or part of a sign exclusive of a flashing sign comprising a video monitor or an electronic display for the display of images, words, or numbers in an animated format used exclusively for the purpose of conveying a message is not permitted in the agricultural district under bylaw 1350. So the sign as it is not allowed to be able to give animated messaging and so on. This is what I believe she's telling us here. It further states the proposed sign does not constitute an electric media sign since the words and numbers are not proposed to be displayed in animated format. This proposed use constitutes a lighted sign, which is defined as a sign that is lit either internally or externally to enhance its visibility. Lighted signs are permitted in the agricultural district. One such example is the Viewpoint Winery sign is indicated below, and she's got a picture of that below. What I need to know from administration, is this still correct? And I'll maybe have some questions after that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Lori, can you go ahead and answer that?
Absolutely. Okay, so first and foremost, in reference to the animation and the electronic media sign, so the electronic media sign, sorry about that, as defined in our sign bylaw, incorporates the flashing, the animation. This particular sign, as we had described in past reports, the intent is to use an electronic media sign as a lighted sign. In other words, yes, it may have the capabilities of being animated. However, it will be used solely for the display of a message. As Deputy Mayor Malash has indicated, the intent is to have a dark background. We did have that discussion with the applicant to have that black background and to use that for really just as the backdrop to the signage. As council had agreed to earlier, about I believe it was a month ago now, where there was the intent to only allow for the change of the sign once daily. We did write that into the bylaw to say no more than once daily. So that way it would prevent the electronic media sign from being used as an electronic media sign. The words lighted sign, as defined in our sign bylaw, which we described at our last, or 2 meetings ago rather, we encountered an issue that we did discover, and were disheartened to discover, that lighted signs are technically in our sign bylaw not permitted, nor not explicitly identified. And so it leaves us in this limbo area for any lighted sign in any district. The intent was to allow, and will always be to allow, lighted signs in agricultural districts. Again, the applicant's intent is to use an electronic media sign as a lighted sign. The image as displayed in our report, as Deputy Mayor Milosh indicates on page 85, that image was an example of one line of open 11 to 6. The example there our intent was not to mislead in any way. What we have in front of you is an application. If we scroll down to the actual application with the drawing, or scroll up, the drawing does indicate that the face of the area is such, and I don't have the actual calculations in front of me. The face of the area can be used, which we identify right beneath that any part of the face of that sign can be used for display of the message. Deputy Mayor Milosh, was there a third question?
Was there something else, Deputy Mayor?
No, so what are, I guess what I'm trying to get to is that our sign bylaw does not permit electronic media signs to be incorporated into the sign. So the variance, if he's asking for a variance, the variance would have to be to ask to use an electronic media sign only to be used as a stationary sign. And then we would have to write rules in there as to what can be done on that sign in the bylaw that we specifically have for Crew Winery. So for instance, the black background and only one color of lettering, whether it be yellow, green, red, whatever he wants to use, we'd have to have that written into the bylaw, correct?
Administration does not recommend, Deputy Mayor, that we limit the color. For example, it would be very difficult for our enforcement team to have eyes on that sign. It would be no different than, say, if a corporation were to have a lighted sign and for us to limit the color of it. So the color is to the discretion of the applicant. If there are concerns with the animation, we can certainly, which we have written that into the bylaw. However, as far as a color is concerned, I think the intent, as Mr. Gorski has indicated, is to have that black background and use of green or red, depending if the business is closed, for those words.
Can we define black background though in the bylaw?
We did not define black background. If that's something that council wishes to impose, we can certainly work towards that, and I don't see an issue with enforcement of a black background. I just don't think I can actually enforce the color of the text.
Okay. The black background will help mediate some of the brightness of the sign. And that's why I'm suggesting that I would like to see a black background. That was my understanding what was going to happen. But if we don't have it specifically written into the bylaw, then there's options. And whoever, maybe Mr. Gorski today that owns the sign, but who knows in 10 years or 20 years from now, who's going to own that business, and they may have a different idea and did not agree to what we are talking about this evening. So I would like to see at least black background into the bylaw. Also illumination, and I know you've talked about illumination being hard to manage, but I would like to see in there that's specific to this bylaw for Crew Winery, that the illumination set at a max of 40% of the max illumination capability. Now, not that we can necessarily, somebody, we're not going to be looking out for that. We're going to hope that he's honest with this, and I'm sure he will be. And if not, we have neighbors who will definitely be telling us that it's not happening. And at that point in time, that's when we would be able to check. And Mr. Gorski has said that he has a dial that he can crank it down to the 40%. I think that was the least he can crank it down to, and he thought that was a comfortable level. And then we don't have to worry about it being so bright. And the other question was that in this document here that I just read a minute ago from Mr. Jaworski's report of August the 4th, it said the signs proposed to be automatically set to turn on and off at 10 a.m. and turn on at 10 a.m. and turn off at 6 p.m. I'm wondering, we talked about if you had special events or something like that, but I think we have to have in the bylaw to be operated during business hours in order that that's part of the rules that have to go along with this specific bylaw or this exception that we're making, because this is an electronic sign being used as a stagnant sign, like as a lit sign.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just to give council a heads up, Mr. Gorski's on standby. If there's going to be any questions. So, Councilor Guerin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Lori, for the updated report, and thanks for taking the time on this file and meeting with me about it. Last meeting, the bylaw didn't pass, and several councilors, even a couple of those that approved it, were scratching our heads trying to figure out if what we were trying to finalize was what we actually approved or not. And after hearing Lori speak on this, I'm not sure if it's any clearer, and I'm not sure if it even mirrors what we as council thought was what we approved. And that's why these electronic media signs aren't permitted in certain areas. So when you try to do for one and allow it, it gets really messy. And based on what I've heard on the electronic portion of the report, we are not going to be able to enforce this. It really is leaving us with a lot of future concerns for our bylaw enforcement, where I've heard OPP, I've heard we can't limit the background colors and such. So anyways, I'm going to share some of my thoughts, some of my opinions with you all tonight, and I don't want to miss anything. So I'm going to be reading. I apologize for that, but it's a pretty important file and I just don't want to miss anything. I'm also going to share at the end of it a few images that I hope are a more realistic representation of how the sign will look if approved tonight. My main issue I have with the sign continues to be the electronic media portion of the sign, and with permitting any electronic media sign to be used as a changeable message sign in an agricultural zone. So I'll spend much of my time discussing this matter as opposed to the sign height and the sign face area. I also want to address the difference between an illuminated sign and an electronic media sign, as there seems to be some confusion still on that as well. I put value in the fact that the applicants made concessions with respect to the sign's overall height, but I do not like the way in which it was portrayed to us in the renderings. I don't feel what we are thinking we are approving is really what is actually going to be going up. We need to keep in mind that once this sign is installed, there is a little control over the electronic media portion of the sign. It's going to be difficult to enforce, similar to our fireworks bylaw, which we all get numerous complaints about, and this will not sit well with our residents if this is permitted. I want to provide you a little background on my knowledge of the file. I have a lot of experience in the sign industry. I worked and or owned one of the largest electronic sign companies in Windsor, Essex between the years of 95 and 2004. We manufactured, installed, and serviced various types of signs, from wall signs and neon signs to pylon signs and LED electronic media signs. Our signs were installed in many municipalities, not only in Canada, but throughout the US. I've installed many electronic message signs, similar to the one the crew is proposing. I'm quite knowledgeable on how the electronic media signs work, and what their capabilities of displaying are once they're installed. This being said, I also was an advocate of these signs back in the day, but typically only in the commercial zones back then. The overall majority of the municipalities I installed these signs in had similar bylaws to ours. They still do today. Most allow these signs now, but are limited to municipal properties, institutional properties, places of worship, and commercial districts. Typically, these signs are not permitted in agricultural or industrial zones. From the beginning, there's been some confusion as to the difference between what is an illuminated sign and what is an electronic media sign. I want to help educate council and everybody listening tonight on the difference. There's two common types of illuminated signs. The first type is a sign which is illuminated from within, and it's referred to as a self-illuminated sign. It is illuminated internally by traditional lighting, usually fluorescent bulbs, and in some cases, neon and LED stripping. The main difference in this case is that the LED in these types of signs are not visible, like they are on electronic media sign. They are limited to clear lighting and do not have the capability of flash or animation. Their purpose is to backlight a sign as to illuminate the business name and logo from the inside out. The light is much softer than that of exposed LEDs. A good example of this type of sign is the CIBC wall sign and the dollar store wall signs in Essex Center. The second type of illuminated sign is an exterior illuminated sign. It's typically illuminated with flood, halogen type lights or neon. The difference here is the lights are shining on the sign, not from the sign. And that's a big difference. This means the light is not a nuisance or distraction to motorists, cyclists, or homeowners because the lights are shining on the sign from the sign, or on the sign, not from the sign. A great example of this is Oxley Winery and many other wineries we have in our region. The two are not the same as an electronic media sign, which is not permitted in our bylaw within agricultural districts, and that's for good reason. We surveyed our residents and they were asked if they supported or didn't support an illuminated sign. We didn't ask them if it was an illuminated sign or even an illuminated message. We asked them if they supported or not support an electronic media sign as part of a business identification, business advertising sign along County Road 50. The overwhelming majority, 77% said no, and only 14% said yes, but even those 14% had restrictions with it. The fact we are considering allowing this applicant to call his electronic media sign an illuminated sign is the problem. It is not an illuminated sign. And even if we were to permit the electronic media sign to be installed with stipulations, and even if those stipulations, as Deputy Mayor Malash said, were spelt out in black and white in the amended bylaw, we will have an extremely difficult time controlling the type of messaging the applicant will put up, or how often the message will be changed, or how bright the lumens will be. It has the capability of being everything our bylaw does not permit and our residents voted not in favor of. We do not even know if it is a one color media sign or if it's a full color media sign. I also want to address the topic of viewpoint sign that does have an LED component to it. Their portion of the sign that reads open in our past report packages is not remotely close to what Cruz is proposing. Viewpoints is not on the county road, but it is on the side road and it is still within the no zone. It's just 6 inches high roughly, and it's just capable of displaying one line. Its capabilities are limited also to text, symbols, and numbers, no animation, and the approximately up to 8 to 10 characters on one line total by virtue of the actual size of the sign. So it's not even close to what Cruz sign will be capable of doing. This is what I believe council was being asked to approve on September 8th, similar to Viewpoint. We saw an image of Viewpoint, we saw open, we saw one line, we said, I think we can go there. I wasn't in agreement with it, but we did pass it, and that's what I think we were looking at. So I want to share now, share with you some images now to better help us visually see what we're talking about. The measurements I'm using are those that were taken by our own bylaw enforcement team. The renderings are a realistic representation of how the sign will look if approved and has proposed. So I will try to see if I can share this. They say it's going to be easy, so hopefully it is. And it is. All right, so this page here, this slide shows the original Cruz sign in the top right corner, accompanied with our town's measurements. So I took those measurements and brought it into scale and broke the sign apart to how the applicant is going to be installing it once it was approved. So that just gives you all the measurements of the sign to scale, shows a 6-foot person standing next to it. So we have a better visual of exactly kind of what it's going to look like. The next screen, I added a person to the top one. So this was at the top, this is the applicant's rendering in the September 8th, 2020 council agenda. And it's easy to see that the drawing is nowhere near scale and is a false representation of how the sign will actually look and what it truly measures. So if we were to look at that and he was to put a 2-scale person standing next to his measurements, that's what I was envisioning this sign was going to look like. But in reality, it's going to look like it is in the bottom. Again, I don't have much issue anymore with the sign face area or with the height. It's much larger than what's typically allowed, but he asked for an amendment, and we met him on that amendment, and I'm okay with all that stuff. This was the sign portion of the report that Deputy Mayor Malash had concerns with, and so did I. The illustration that was presented with a measurement next to it, mind you, led me to believe exactly what Deputy Mayor Malash was thinking. Black background, 1 line, open 11/6, just as it says in Rita's report. What it should have showed, if this is what he really was intending to do, was what I show at the bottom. The capability of this sign doing 4 to 5 lines and a similar message to that. The next page, what I've done was I've taken the sign, I put a dark background behind it to show you what these signs are going to look like at night. The top left one is what we call a full color multimedia sign. It's capable of putting pictures up, drawings up. The applicant has never expressed to us yet whether or not this is a full color LED sign, or if it is in fact just a static 1 color, 2 color, or say 3 color. These LEDs can go red, they can go white, they can go green, they can go yellow. And if they can do all those, then they really are an RGB, which gives them the capabilities of doing what the sign shows in the top left. And I don't think that what I'm seeing here is an eyesore, by no means. I just know it's not approved in that area. And I'm just trying to give everybody a better realization of what's going to happen here. The traditional messages, if he doesn't have the full color, would be any of these other 5 on here. He has a capability of making his fonts and the text portrayed. You see open in the top right, he can make it that big. He can make it the whole screen if he wants. He can put multiple lines. He can put red background, white background. Either way, whether it's a black background, red background, white background, the LED is what the concern is going to be. That's what's going to jump out at everybody when you're driving, when you're cycling, or what have you. And then the last one I want to share with everybody is just some examples of LED electronic multimedia signs, full color across the top. So if he has this type of sign, once it's up, it has the capabilities of doing everything that's shown on there. At the bottom, if he has one that's like viewpoints, which is 1 color perhaps, then he could put a message on like that, where it shows you, various colors and various lines. So that's just what I wanted to share in my findings with everybody, hoping that it helps everybody get a better idea of what we're looking at realistically. After our last meeting, I felt the need to utilize my sign experiences and share it with everybody. And that was the purpose behind it all. Either way, I'm still not in support of the electronic media portion of the sign in any fashion. I believe our residents got it right the first time around. I believe that some of us that voted it down the first time got it right. And really it comes down to not being able to control it once it's up. There's so many things that it'd be almost impossible to control it. We can ask him to dim it to 40%. Doesn't mean he will. It's easily done at the computer. We can trust him. We can trust in our applicant and say, I think he's a man of his word. He's going to do that. But we can also doubt that because he applied for this sign without a permit in the first place. And in my opinion, he's done a few things along the line that make me feel like he's trying to stick hand a little bit around our bylaw. And our administration, I feel, is being forced to push this sign of his, because it was already built, into fitting a bylaw. And I just don't agree with it. So that's all I have to say on it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Barron. Councillor Bjorkman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Joe, for the sign education. That was it was really good. The note you sent out, I appreciated that. We've been dealing this a long time now, and I've got a few things written down here too, because I didn't want to miss things I wanted to say. But the main thing is, like, why are we here today? We're here January 20th, 2020. The proponent requested a site-specific amendment for a pole sign with an electronic media component. That was the original request. However, the sign was already constructed along with the electronic media component. If the sign had come forward before the sign was built or assembled, I would have voted no to the pole sign and the electronic media sign. That's where we have to go back to today. We've all been caught up in trying to make our bylaw fit a sign instead of a sign fit our bylaw. We never had an opportunity to have a proponent come forward and say, okay, here's my idea for the sign. Although it was in the site plan, although it was obviously missed by the builder, missed by the proponent that they needed to come forward and get a permit to do that. I contended before and I'll contend again, we really are having a meeting today to decide whether or not to allow this sign to be built. There is no sign. Sign's not built. If anybody has the problem belongs with the proponent, not with the town. The fact that the proponent bought an illegal sign and erected it should have no bearing on our decisions. We are acting right now as the council of a proponent bringing to us a request to build a sign. And that sign is way outside of our bylaws. And that's all I want to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else from council? We have Mr. Gorski. Go ahead, Councillor Verbeek.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Joe, for that sign education. I'm just, Lori, some of the things that Mrs. Chadwick said, our bylaw says, no to these electronic media signs. And so our town doesn't incorporate a municipal-wide regulation for its intensity of illumination, is what she said, and nor should it. So we would have to create it if we did set precedent tonight and allowed this lighted sign. She also pointed out, and this had jumped out at me, that we would have, our OPP would have to be trained on how to enforce and ticket this. And then after the fact, the tickets for the infractions would not be defendable in court. So I see Mr. Gyortsky's sign, and I think the sign would be just beautiful if it was used in accordance with our current bylaw. It will be a beautiful sign without going so high above with our height restrictions and including this big 4x6 lighted section. Now, when many times that Mr. Gyortsky spoke to council, I can't remember which of it was, he explained an issue where there was something of power flicker, and the sign had come on and it had distracted a whole bunch of neighbors, and it was very highly illuminated, which of course could be, create danger for drivers and distractions and infringe upon, people's homes. So he had said that because he had acknowledged this potential and said that he was completely willing at any time that this happens in the future, if we allow the lighted sign, it's as simple as him running down and repairing the issue. He would happily rectify the issue, he said. So we know that we're setting ourselves up for potential incidents of this happening again. So again, I'm very clear. Everybody here knows how I feel about this. I think like we're on the precipice of a giant rabbit hole that we could jump into to appease one business owner and in turn ignore all our residents that responded to our survey, all our residents that have called and emailed us, and all of the neighbors that are going to be affected and are already being divided. And this is a big rabbit hole I don't want to jump into. So I won't be supporting it. I think that this sign could be used beautifully in accordance to our bylaw as it is, our new bylaw.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Van den Dolen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I think 3 or 4 of the last councillors have made all sorts of suppositions about the infractions that the owner of the sign is going to commit. And since he's online, maybe we should ask him about what his plans are to use this sign. Since everyone seems to be speaking for him about what he's going to do with it, can we ask Mr. Gorski how he's going to run this sign?
So I'm gonna have to have permission to have him speak. So council, I have a motion to allow him to speak. Councillor Van den Dolen, and have a seconder to allow Bernard to speak. Deputy Mayor Malash, all in favor? Carried. Go ahead, Bernard, if you're there. Bernard, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. There were an awful lot of issues brought up, and there's like Councillor Van der Dolen had said, there's an awful lot of speculation about violations in the future. I wish I had a crystal ball, but that does not exist. My intentions are to keep it open during business hours, and I can put a cap on it about 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night and say, even if business hours go beyond that period of time, I will have it turned off. I've investigated and purchased a device that can go beyond any power outage, so that, because it's battery operated, and it'll sit there and I can program it so that it cannot go on and come back on as a default of 100% in the event of a 2 a.m. power outage. I like I say, that was something I learned by the hard way by finding out that's the way the sign operates. But I've gone the extra mile to do that. And it is in the variance I'm asking for is so minor in nature. It's less than 10%, and I've seen so many signs approved in the area that are well beyond that. I mean, even last meeting, you guys approved a lighted billboard sign that was much larger than the sign bylaw things. I can. And I remember last July that you didn't have any appetite for changing the bylaws. And I think it's very clear that a lot of changes have to be made because there's hundreds and hundreds of signs in the town of Essex, either agricultural or urban areas that are well beyond the scope of the bylaw. So, there's a lot of work to be done there. I don't know, the display is going to be the display. It's certainly not going to be offensive. Whether it says come in, we're open between 11 and 6, and I write in a line like Merry Christmas. Will you guys object to me saying Merry Christmas to the public? I sure hope not. And then I've heard tonight that you guys think I'm playing games with this whole thing, and that's certainly not the case. Every time that we've had a meeting, I've had to go back and rethink about all of these concerns that councillors have, and I have not yet received one phone call from any councillors. I've received one or two emails from certain councillors, but no phone calls and no discussions to figure out how can we work around this? How can we work together? I mean, all I've had was a negative attitude by Councillor Bondi and Councillor Verbeek and Councillor Guerin, and it's starting to look like this is getting to be a very personal vendetta instead of a logical argument about why can't my sign be like hundreds of other signs that currently exist in this county. So I guess I just have to wait and hear how you guys vote, and then we'll go to the next step.
Thank you, Joe. Just to add away from the sign, I know when I was campaigning, just let council know, when I was campaigning, and I'm not going to mention names here, but when I was campaigning, I had one of the residents close to the area point across the street, not at the sign, at the building, and said, how could council allow this to be built? We come out here for privacy. So this is where we're going. Now it's a sign. First it was a building, now it's a sign, now it's a CIP program. Okay, where does it stop? I'll just share that with council. Thank you. Councilor Verbeek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to take exception to Mr. Gyortzky's comments saying that I had a vendetta against him. I've only had a long telephone conversation with you 4 or 5 weeks ago. Other than that, that was the only time we've ever spoken to each other. There's certainly no vendetta, and I'd like to be very clear on that. I was elected to try and be a voice for the people of our community, and they have spoken resoundingly loud opposed to the lighted portion and the height. So those are my reasons for not supporting any changes to this bylaw to accommodate the sign. There is no vendetta against someone I don't even know.
Okay, we don't have to go that way, Councilor. I mean, we're not going to get into that. Who's next here? Councilor Bondi, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When Mr. Gorski was speaking to council, he was going there. Councilor Verbeek was just defending herself. So if we have to allow councilors to defend themselves if delegates are saying that it's personal, because I do truly believe that it is not a personal issue. It's a bylaw issue. Whenever you, talk about bylaws in this town and people not upholding the bylaws, it all of a sudden becomes a personal issue. Right there, personally, it's a personal vendetta. That's not true. So, Mr. Gorski, respectfully, it's really hard now for the community and administration and some on council to trust the agreement because you put up the sign without a permit, despite our administration telling us that on the site visit, a permit was needed for a sign. It's also a technical sign with electricity. So I have no doubt that the contractor that put up the sign should have known that there was a permit needed. So that's something. This sign is something the community does not want. It's something other businesses on that road do not want. This is something, we all keep talking about one business, but there are many businesses on County Road 50. So if we give this competitive advantage that Mr. Gorski wants, we're giving a competitive advantage to him despite the wants and needs of all of our other businesses. All of our other wineries have put millions of dollars into this area too. I can't believe that, again and again, we keep talking about this and it's not the right fit for our community. I am going to be opposed to going to do any more surveys with this council because we went out there, we did January 20th, we said we want to review it. Right, we said, I'm not in favor, I think it was Councillor Bjorkman that said, I'm not in favor of site specific. Let's do, I'm not in favor of site specific. Everybody has to play by the same set of the rules. The Deputy Mayor Meloche said, people love the historic charm of the county. Today, I shared with a few councillors that we got a resident from, I believe, Baldwin, right on the lake, saying that he can see the sign at night. So we can say what we're doing is site specific and it's not precedent setting. But if another winery comes to us and wants the same thing, how are we going to say no? We're going to have to treat everybody fairly after that and allow them to have basically whatever they want. So I am strongly opposed to this. I think that this file has been one of the top contentious files. It has further divided our council, further divided our business community, our residents. We've supported this winery with grants. We've supported this winery in other ways. We've built trails for active living. And now business hours. We want the winery to flourish. So business hours can mean 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. You know, this bylaw, if we're going to pass it as a council, as a majority, needs to have a lot of more definition in it. Whether it's enforceable or not, we have to put it in there because it's going to be the model going forward on that road. We're going to have more requests. So we're actually changing the bylaw right now, which is what we said we didn't want to do. I have heard back from residents who are so unhappy that we have taken up this much time. And, you know, it's everything. It's the berm. You know, yeah, it's very creative, but it's just another way. It's our community feels like they've been jerked around, you know, haphazard and unprofessional signs. All the other wineries have haphazard and professional signs. That's not true. I have a travel guide. I don't know if you can see it. It is the official map for Prince Edward County, Lake Erie North Shore. I Googled several of these wineries in this map. Not one of them that I could find has electronic.
We're not talking about the other area. We're talking about the sign County Road 50. Let's stay on track here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I am saying is that a successful business does not need a flashing sign that's going to impact the neighborhood negatively. You know, it was mentioned that from Mr. Gorski in January that he didn't want to do anything to impact the neighborhood negatively. If that was the case, we would not be here today. We would be with our existing bylaw and not having this discussion. The height, no big deal. The flashing media sign and its capabilities, that's a big deal. That's not what our residents want. Our residents want us to represent them, and the majority of them do not want this. So I am not comfortable shoving something down their throat that they don't want. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just add to that. What we're doing here, we're listening to the people that yelled the loudest. When I have I'm going to repeat it. When I have a resident pointing across the street, wasn't even in favor of the building, that says a lot. Go ahead.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. It's crew that's yelling the loudest.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Vanderbilt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, you know, to segue from what you just last said, I tend to agree. You know, I think that far from what this council thinks that, you know, everybody's worked up about this, I think most people could not care less about this sign or any other sign in town. All they want is some reasonable rules that doesn't impinge on their lives. And, you know, even at its tallest, even at its most offensive, this sign was reasonable and pretty small in scale, especially compared to the fuss being made over it for the past year by people who keep complaining about how long this process is taking, even as they themselves prolong this process month after month after month. The sign should have been up half a year ago, and all the people complaining about how long this is taking are the ones who are delaying it and keep calling it back to council. Obviously, lighted signs should be permitted. Otherwise, everybody in this town and business is out of business, and nobody could even, from Highway 3, could even find our Tim Hortons or the McDonald's in town. You know, I find it interesting that Councillor Guerin said he used to sell these signs, but now that he's not selling them, he's against this one. Well, you know, people need signs or they're out of business. We were obviously on tenuous legal ground of dictating colors and lumens and backgrounds, and you know, we're really not allowed to do that. And this is how government gets really, really stupid and earns the contempt, earns the justified contempt of voters. When we start, you know, debating how many angels of what color can dance on a pole or whether they can have a pole at all, this is ridiculous. You know, our town's goal, our official plan is to have people invest, have businesses start, jobs created, and especially in agritourism. That's our crown jewel, remember? So here we got a guy who's put millions into it. We're trying to squash him. This isn't about a sign. I mean, it's obvious to anybody who's been following this debate for the past year. This is not about a sign. This is about something else. I think this is about a group of people who are determined to show that they're the boss. And unless you come and kowtow to them and ask their permission, then they're going to put you down. I think the sign is fine. I think most people think it's fine. I'll vote for it. I'll vote against any attempt to block it. He's compromised enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will be voting in favor of it too, for sure. Councillor Bowman, you haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, and obviously this has gone on for a long time, and as everybody has talked about, when something doesn't meet what we're looking at, the individual has the right to come and ask for a variance on whatever it happens to be. The majority of them are size, and the height is one of the items on this one. And I believe that's of a minor issue. The thing that everybody's coming down on is the lighting side of it. And one of the problems we have allowed lighted signs in other areas. And so now it comes down to the issue of the type of lighting and what's there. And I'm still not 100% clear on our bylaw what really limits what the sign can do as far as lighting goes. And I mean, we can look at all the issues with the electronic portion of it that allows you to do, all kinds of things, where a static sign basically is solid and doesn't move or do anything like that. And I think the issue has come down here. This is a electronic sign that's been used as proposed to be used in a static issue or mode. And I'm not sure how our bylaw as it stands right now really addresses these type of things. And that's probably an issue that council hasn't looked at. Once we allowed the first ones to go out to be illuminated. And I know they're smaller, they're very minor, but we allowed it. So now it comes down to a matter of how much. And we were sort of admonished for looking at a new sign bylaw that probably could have addressed some of these things that we were moving forward. And by not going ahead and looking at a new sign bylaw, we sort of really end up in this type of a situation. And I guess when it really comes down to it, you're going to have to rely on the people involved to honor their commitments to the community as they move forward. I've only met Mr. Gorski once or twice, so I really don't know the gentleman that well. And moving forward, I would hope he has the honor of the community in his mind and going forward. I think I'll still support the motion as I originally moved going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna make a decision here. Councillor Darren, did you want to say something last year? We're gonna make a decision.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councillor Van Dolen, you're obviously allowed to have your own opinion, just as I'm allowed to have my own opinion and others are allowed to have their own opinion. I do have experience in back in the signage industry. I didn't sell them. I actually manufactured them, serviced them, and installed them. So it's not like, I wasn't involved for 10 years plus doing this stuff. And I'm not against the type of sign that Mr. Gorski wants. I'm against where Mr. Gorski wants to put it. If County Road 50 is in an agri district and the agri district does not allow electronic media signs, then they're not allowed. He is not applying for a minor variance. A minor variance should be, hey, you're only allowed to have a sign this big. Can I have it a little bit bigger? You're only allowed to have a sign this many square face area. Can I have it a little bit bigger? He's asking for us to allow him something that we don't permit in our bylaw. So if we want to permit Mr. Gorski this sign, then why don't we write it in the bylaw? We let everybody have this sign, because that's what we're going to have to be doing with. And if we do that, then we're doing an injustice to all of our residents and taxpayers who don't want it. To say that it is not something that that anybody cares about, just a few that they're speaking loudly, is not true. We did a survey. We had a great response to the survey. 77% when asked about the electronic media sign, whether it was not asked whether it was going to be used in any different fashion, whether it was animated, flashing or not, static or not. It was a no. 14% that did say yes said yes, but with stipulations. It's pretty straightforward. I don't even know Mr. Gorski. I've been to his winery. I love his winery. Go there a lot. I have nothing personal against Mr. Gorski. He made an error maybe by putting a sign up without a permit. I've overlooked that. He's made some renderings that aren't to scale, that aren't even close to representing what I've shown tonight, and I'm over that. But I'm not going to get over what our taxpayers are saying, and they don't want this type of sign. And I'm not interested in sitting here and debating the next site-specific one that comes to us. That's all I need to say on it. Thank you.
One last speaker, Deputy Mayor Melange, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, your worship. I gotta say that I think that Councillor Bjorkman had put it very eloquently. We're trying to, if Mr. Gorski had come with the proposal that he had originally and had wanted to put something up like what he wanted, I probably would have said no. Not probably, I would have said no with the height restrictions and the poles and the pole being a pole sign and so on. But with that said, I had called Mr. Gorski after the fact and said, you know, why are you proposing to put the electronic media sign into this equation with the new bylaw or with the new sign? If you want to have a lit sign, that's okay, because our administration is telling us lit signs are permitted in our agricultural zones. And his explanation was that it's, once you buy the sign, you pay a lot of money for the sign, but you lose an extremely lot of money on the sign by trying to sell it as a secondhand sign, and the nature of the LED signs. So I don't know who he was talking to get that information, but that's the information that was relayed to me. And so in my view, I was trying to fit what he had into his variance to make it work so that he wouldn't have to go through, and any business, I would do that for any business within our community, try and make it more affordable to go to a new version of what perhaps would be allowed. With that report that I talked about this evening, open 6 to or 10 to 6, that looked reasonable to me. On a black background, one color letter, can't be super illuminated. But now I'm hearing that we can't enforce that. And I need to hear from our administration. So I'm going to go back to Ms. Chadwick and ask again, does our group or our administration, our bylaw enforcement team, believe that they cannot enforce what I'm suggesting to be written into the bylaw, that it has to be a black screen, that it can only be illuminated at 40%, can only be limited to certain colors of lettering. And now I'm asking about letter size. Can we enforce that? Ms. Chadwick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to you, Deputy Mayor Melange, for posing those questions one last time. It is going to be very difficult for our enforcement team to enforce something site specifically. And I mean this from a standpoint of the municipality where there are not regulations imposing black background on any sign in the municipality. It will be difficult for us as a municipality to impose regulations site specifically on something that's not regulated in the entire sign bylaw. In other words, the illumination level will be very difficult to regulate that as a municipality. To enforce it, if I write that into the bylaw, you as a council decide to put that into our bylaw and pass it, there would be concerns with that. My recommendation is that if it's something that's regulated, all signs in the town of Essex shall have a black background, or all signs at the town of Essex shall have illumination at 40% level, then it would be putting that municipality in a stronger position to defend the bylaw. It would be stronger of a defense if a ticket is issued, for example, if the site-specific bylaw. Okay, it's hard to hear me. It would be difficult to defend a ticket if the illumination level or the color of the background or the number of lines is not regulated in the entire municipality. Under the bylaw itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, thank you for letting me ask those questions because that wholeheartedly affects how I'm going to vote on this.
Okay, thank you. So we're just to council, this has been a tough issue. We've fought with this for months now. So tonight is the night we're going to make a decision on this bylaw. So I'm going to leave it to council. I'm going to open up the council. Somebody wants to make a motion on this, or
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a motion on the floor. That's the motion from September 21st
Okay.
that was taken from the table. Let's see.
Recorded vote, please, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Clerk.
oh, no kidding. Yeah, I know. It'll be recorded vote.
And read it again, please.
Go ahead.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, on the motion as moved by Councillor Bowman at the September 21st meeting, as seconded by Councillor Vanderdolen, also at the September 21st meeting, and pursuant to a request for a recorded vote on September 21st, and as taken from the table this evening, the motion that bylaw 1950 being a bylaw regulating the erection of signs in the town of Essex be read a first, a second, and a third time, and be finally passed this evening. On the motion, how do you vote, Councillor Bondi?
Opposed.
Councillor Vanderdolen?
In favor.
Councillor Bjorkman?
Opposed?
Councillor Verbeek?
Opposed.
Councillor Guerin?
Opposed.
Councillor Bowman?
Support.
Deputy Mayor Malash?
Opposed?
Mayor Snively?
Support.
With a recorded vote of 3 in favor and 5 opposed, the motion fails. So through you, Mr. Mayor, with the motion defeated, we're right back at status
Square one.
quo with respect to the bylaw.
So go ahead, Laurie. I think Mr. Gorski's going to have to come forward again and make changes.
So the options now that essentially the amendments were turned away or turned down rather. The municipality had issued prior to, I believe it was the end of August, we had issued a notice of violation to the applicant. And we would have had the opportunity to lay those charges. Now that council has made a decision against that sign. However, we understand that the sign has since been removed. So in other words, Mr. Gorski's fact that there is no sign we do not need to lay that charge at this time. Should Mr. Gorski come forward to administration with a application for a sign permit that falls within the limits of the sign bylaw, without any gray areas, without any amendments, we could approve that administratively, and council would not say, would require a decision on council's part.
Thank you, Laurie. And thank you, Mr. Gorski, for being on hand to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 8.1 on this evening's agenda is Finance and Business Services 2020-02. Results of a request for proposal for external audit services. That said report be received and that council awards the RFP to KPMG LLP in the total amount of $89,175.34 for a 3-year term with an option to extend for a further 3-year term, subject to satisfactory performance and price negotiation.
Need a mover, please, Deputy Mayor Malash?
And a comment.
Yes, and are you gonna move it though with a comment?
Yep, move it.
Okay, move it, seconder. Councillor Verbeek, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Malash, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I just want to say that, I've been involved in audits through accounting and year ends with a lot of different companies. And I can say that, from what I gather from discussions with our finance department, that KPMG has done a fantastic job. So this doesn't surprise me, and I'm excited by the fact that KPMG has won this award. But just a quick question to Mr. Morrison. There was a second bid, and I don't think it mentions it in the report at all. Is it appropriate for us to ask who the second bidder was?
What's that about?
Sounded like something from outer space.
Through the chair. Yes, the second bid was BDO. I'd also like to thank BDO for the service that they provided. We've been with BDO since I began with municipality in 2012, and they were always a stand-up group and provide great service. It's always good to go to market and check competitiveness, and we're looking forward to transitioning and having conversations with the new firm.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions?
Mayor,
Go ahead.
thank you.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Item 10 on this evening's agenda, any update from County Council?
Richard, do you have anything? Or Deputy Mayor Malash? I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, so this next meeting is this road issue coming up, Deputy Mayor,
Yeah, so the road issue's coming up, but we still won't be voting. This won't be a vote yet. It's just a review on the evening. So it's going to be continuing.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Our CEO would like to speak on the road issue.
Yeah, through your worship. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So there was a meeting at Deputy Mayor Malash is referring to the road issue coming back to County Council. They're going to come back with a bit of a direction for the future on how to move with respect to the report. So they're looking at, how we can take what we have and what we can do to at least use that as reference to move forward. So I think that's what they're going to be coming back with, are those options to look at a planning process, potentially a master plan, which would take into account the work that's been done as kind of background information, and then look to move forward on that kind of from this point in time. They really want to, not lose everything that they've done and all the data and all the work that's been put in, but they realize that there's got to be something more in order to get everybody at the table to agree. So that's where they're going to be coming to you on Wednesday, is to look for that direction at County Council.
Good. Deputy Mayor, I will not be there, so you're going to have to argue for us. There's no way we can assume County Road 50. It would that would sink us. Just from Colchester to the town line, we would be well over 20 million. So we can't afford to take that on. So I'm glad there's not going to be a vote or anything, but please bring that issue forward and fight for us there. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 11.1. Sorry.
Oh, hold on. Councillor Vandenholm, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly through you to the Deputy Mayor, I've heard through the grapevine that at least one other local town that's facing a downloading of a major road is looking at getting legal counsel to see if our agreement with the county might be abrogated by this downloading. Maybe this is to the CAO and other staff and maybe the town clerk, but apparently we have a legal deal. The town of Essex has a legal deal with Essex County and they're obligated to look after certain roads. And if they dump this stuff on us, they're breaking the deal. So have we looked at a legal examination of our options if they try to download this onto us? I'm not really expecting an answer from you now. Just I'm putting it out there. If it's coming up, maybe somebody should look at this.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, Counselor, because if you look at County Road 50, take a look at County Road 50, and you've been on it many times, you live out that way, I do too. They haven't done anything to that road for years. And Counselor Bjorkman, you've been on that road. The road's in terrible shape. And for them to download that to us, I would have suspected this year or the year before, they would have resurfaced that road, but they have no intentions of touching it as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what you think, Deputy Mayor, but it's never been brought up to resurface that road. So if you can comment on that, I don't think it's ever been brought up. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Part of the discussion on downloading of the roads is that the roads would have to be brought to a certain level before they would be taken on by the lower tier municipality. So we'd have to be, and maybe our CAO can affirm that, but that's what I believe I've read in the reports and I've heard discussed is so County Road 50, if we were to take it over, would have to be brought up to a certain level of maintenance before we would take it on. But I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that we've got to argue that we do not want to take that road over for the next 5,000 years. We want the county to control it. And we're going to argue that we believe that tourism roads such as County Road 50 need to be remaining in the hands of the county and maintained by the county. We have other communities that believe that as well. And we're going to be getting support from other communities that believe this as well. So
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Chris, if you want to.
Yeah, through your worship, Deputy Mayor, you're correct. The first phase, which was supposed to be completed, I think a few months after this was all launched, was to determine technically which roads should be county roads, which roads shouldn't be county roads. And then the second phase was going to talk about how the monies would flush out in terms of who would pay for what, how it would impact the county levy, how it would impact operational impacts. We're still in phase one after, several years here in terms of trying to figure out an agreement on which roads are considered county roads. So I think through this planning process that they're going to propose, you're going to get a different lens and a much more information to be able to make that decision moving forward. So the money part of it definitely is going to be a huge impact, not just for Essex, for all the municipalities. There are municipalities that are getting many more roads downloaded, at least being proposed to being downloaded. So that'll be a whole other issue when we get there. But right now it's the technical part as far as which roads should be county roads. Like I said, though, I think they're going to push this forward with, another master plan and some more investigation and data building that way.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 11.1, that the correspondence listed be received and where indicated to further share with the community.
Any questions on any of the correspondence here? Okay, seeing none, I need
Mr. I do have, are we on 11.1?
yes.
With the AMO update with stage 3 restrictions, has there been any discussion at town hall about when we are going to move out of our emergency? It's hard to ask questions about COVID related because we have no opportunity on our agenda. And I don't like the notice of motion thing is really hard to ask a question. Like, are we to our CAO, are we going to move out of our declaration of emergency anytime soon? Is there talk at the level?
Go ahead, Chris.
Through your worship, there's talk in the region. We've talked about that, and the concern right now is that second wave and what state that's going to put the county in. And it's kind of, we're in a holding pattern to see if that second wave makes things worse. And then if, you know, whether we're pushed back to a different phase, or whether we decide to be pushed back, and what we need to do there. So everyone's kind of in a holding pattern. Let's sit and wait. We're in the emergency. It's not hurting us to be in this right now. We're not pushing any decisions through that council's not aware of, but let's leave it like that till we kind of get clear out of the second wave.
I can just add to that, even today, I think there was in Ontario, I'm speaking Ontario, I think there was 700 and something new cases of COVID today. But down in this area here, we're blessed, because I think there was only 2 or 3 here, which tells us we are following the rules. So, but to Councillor Bondi, I would have to say if the numbers keep going like they are in Ontario, I think we're going to be in a problem here, you know, even down here. So, thank you. I need a motion on all the correspondence. Councillor Verbeek and Councillor Guerin. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 11.2, correspondence to be considered for receipt or receipt and support. 11.2.1 is correspondence from the town of Amherstburg. That the correspondence from the town of Amherstburg dated September 21st to the Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, recommending that Schedule 11 of Bill 108 be amended to return the authority for final decisions to municipal councils, be received or received and supported, and if council chooses to support, that the appropriate letter of support be sent.
It's a pleasure, Council, receive and support. Yep, Councillor Bjorkman, seconder. Councillor Bowman, all in favor?
11.2.2, correspondence from the town of Amherstburg, AODA website compliance extension request. That the said correspondence requesting the province of Ontario extend the compliance deadline requesting the province of Ontario extend the compliance deadline stated in the regulations to require designated public sector organizations to meet the compliance standards by a minimum of 1 year, be received or received and supported. And again, if so chosen to support, that the appropriate letter of support be sent.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of council here? Receive and support? Yep, Councillor Bjorkman and Councillor Guerin.
May I speak to Mr. Mayor, please? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to, as the rep on the accessibility committee, I would personally just like us to receive this. So we are up to date on our website in the town of Essex. We have not had to ask for any additional training or funding support from the province because we have been diligent and our staff have done this. The town of Amherstburg should have already done this, asking for an extension on a deadline, asking for funding support. So if they get funding support, are all the municipalities that are in compliance going to get money now? No, like they need to get their priorities in place and they need to do this. This is part of the provincial regulations. People with disabilities can't pause their disability and put it on hold for a year. So I don't believe the town of Amherstburg should be able to do that as well. Thank you.
Hey, I did have a mover. Councillor Bjorkman, did you want to keep your motion?
Yes, I want to keep the motion, and I will say that not everybody has gone through this year evenly. 2020 there's a lot of work been done, and I congratulate our team. And it should be a priority, and it's great that we've got it done. But not everybody could. Every municipality has gone through this in a different way, and I don't believe. I think it's very important that this gets done, and if they need it, is this group of our residents need to be taken care of. So if they need that to get it done, then I say get it done, and I support it.
Thank you, Councillor. I need a seconder.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Guerin, all in favor? Opposed? Opposed to? Carried.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 11.2.3, correspondence from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, removal of municipal rabbit pheasant hunting licenses in the town of Essex. And this is together with bylaw 1954, being a bylaw to repeal 633. That said correspondence be received and supported, and that bylaw 1953 receive 3 readings and be finally passed this evening.
Need a motion, receive and support. Councillor Van Dolen and Councillor Bowman. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Agenda item 12, that the minutes listed in item 12, together with any recommendations to council, be received, approved, and adopted as circulated. Mover, please. Need a mover, Councillor Verbeek and Councillor Bowman. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 15.1, the following notices of motion were first presented at the September 21st regular meeting and are now being brought forward for this evening for council's consideration. 15.1.1, as moved by Councillor Bjorkman, that administration be directed to review the town's noise bylaw, specifically to the use of bird bangers in our agricultural zone areas, and to use best management practices outlined in the Farming and Food Production Protection Act, reference 1998. As moved by Councillor Bjorkman and would require a seconder. Councillor Bondi seconds it. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Bjorkman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I understand that, we don't have bylaws that are really enforceable in the farming area, in the agricultural area, as far as noise. Farmers have to work all through the night sometimes. I mean, there's just activities that happen. However, there are best practices that I think we can include. Hopefully, I'll ask that question of administration as references to ensure that that our agriculture people have all the best information. And as it turned out, some of these machines were probably going off because they hadn't been attended to. I know Councillor Bondi made some calls at the recent event, and there were a number of places that got their bangers back on their time slots, and things were worked out. But it's just important that our residents and the neighbors around these places, especially as the wineries are growing, they're kind of the bigger user of these, and as they grow, they're encroaching on places that people are already living. There are people that are moving in that aren't aware of what these are. So I just think if there's a way for us to put into our bylaw or put into our rules the best practices for these acoustic bird deterrents, it will go a long way to giving them and our enforcement officers the tools needed to say, this is a best practice. If they get called into something, we could have a copy of that, bring it along with them. That this is the best practices from the Department of Agriculture. So at least we're speaking from a position of authority on the things we're talking about. So really, that's the conversation I wanted to have, and to see if there's a way for us to help to educate people who may not be complying with the best standards, and these machines are going off in the middle of the night.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support a review. Usually every time a councillor brings anything forward, I think it's good to get ahead of it and prevent anything from happening in the future. I haven't heard one complaint since the day we made phone calls. So that's good. Knock on wood. I do like reviewing our bylaws and our policies and seeing how we can get everybody on the same page, bylaw enforcement. Our OPP have been astounding lately, and they're stepping it up on almost every file I talk to them about. So I would love to review the noise bylaw in general. One issue, I'm just going to piggyback, because one issue is fireworks, right? Like, that's an urban issue. Can we define that too? So I support your motion, Councillor Bjorkman, and I thank you for bringing it forward to council.
Anybody else from council? Or what's the pleasure of council at this point?
There's a motion.
Yep, we had a seconder. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 15.1.2 is also a notice of motion brought back from the September 21st meeting for council's consideration this evening. As moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, that council direct administration to investigate the feasibility of partnering with the town of Amherstburg with respect to the operations and ownership of the McGregor sanitary system. Would require a seconder.
Need a seconder for that one. Councillor Bowman. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. This is something that's been ongoing for a very long time. We've been waiting to see how well our arrangement can work, and it's something that happened at the time of amalgamation. At one point in time, this sewage system was operated as a separate system, joint venture between Colchester North and Anderton Townships. At the time that Amherstburg took it over, it continued on for about 5 years after amalgamation, maybe a little bit longer, maybe 7 years, as a joint, not as a joint, but as a separate entity, separate system, like what we have in the town of Essex, where Essex residents in Ward 1 are only responsible for the Ward 1 sanitary system. In Harrow, Ward 4, their sewage lagoons are the responsibility of Ward 4 residents only. In Colchester, Ward 3, the sanitary system that they have in Colchester, Old Colchester South or Ward 3, is the reserves and the rates are set by the costs of operating those lagoons on their own. So what Amherstburg has done over the last, after 7 years of operating it, they decided that they were going to pool all of their sewage lagoons and sanitary systems into one averaged rate. And what ended up happening was the residents in McGregor, both Essex residents and Amherstburg residents, their rates over 2 years doubled. And what we're finding is that if there is a concern on the Essex side of the street, usually they would go to their politician, their local politician, and say, I've got some concerns about certain things that are going on with our sewage system. What can you do? And that politician or local municipal councillor would have some say in, like trying to get something done. Here we have no pull. We can beg and borrow and ask as many times as we want. And it just seems like things do not get done on the Essex side, or for that matter, even on the Amherstburg side, the residents there are frustrated. I think it's time for us to ask on behalf of our residents, our Essex residents, let's go back to the deal that we had originally, and let's go back to the table with Amherstburg and ask them, is there any reason why you wouldn't want to just go back to the way it was to help out the residents of that area? And that being the Essex residents as well as the Amherstburg residents. And I think we should be pushing for this.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Deputy Mayor. That's a very, very good point. Very good point. And we should be in talks with Amherstburg. Anybody else from council have any input on this one? Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for bringing that forward.
We have a motion.
Yeah, we got a motion on the floor. I need all in favor of the motion? Carried. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for that information. It's a good one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, 15.2 is a notice of motion for presentment only this evening. It will be brought forward to the October 19th regular council meeting. As moved by Councillor Bondi, that administration be directed to come back with a diversity training program for council, which includes AODA, customer services standard training, to ensure council is up to date with requirements under accessibility legislation and the Human Rights Code. Item 16 on the agenda, any reports and announcements from council members?
Deputy Mayor Malash, do you have anything? Counselor Verbeek? No. Counselor Bondi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure many of our counselors and our administration are aware, but Project Hope is pretty much built. It's beautiful. It's at the parking lot at the Harrow Arena. So if any counselors can make it out in administration this Saturday at 11 o'clock, they're doing their official grand opening. Bring some beer bottles if you want, or some canned goods. We did, a few of us in the community did a drive last week, and they're still accepting donations of beer bottles, food, cash, whatever, and come out and support them. It's lovely. We had people from other municipalities drive up, come look at it, because they want to do it now too. So we're the envy of the county. So I hope to see everybody there. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Bjorkman, do you have anything? Counselor Darren, do you have anything? No. Counselor Bowman, anything? No. I have just one thing here. Oh, Counselor Van and all, I missed you. Where are you?
Yeah, you did.
Where
No,
are you?
nothing more tonight.
Okay, thanks. I have just one thing to tell council, that Deputy Mayor Malash will be filling my shoes for the next 20 to 24 days. Okay, so I deserve a vacation. I was gonna take a vacation there a couple, 2-3 weeks ago, couldn't get away. I am taking a vacation, so I'll be gone. But Deputy Mayor Malash will be filling it.
Item 17 on the agenda is bylaws. Bylaws for third and final reading, 1951, to confirm the proceedings of the September 21st regular council meeting.
Have a mover there on that one, Counselor Bowman and Counselor Darren. All in favor? Carried.
For two readings this evening, bylaw 1956, being a bylaw to acquire and assume lands for the purpose of dedication as a public highway.
Mover, please. Deputy Mayor Malash and Counselor Bjorkman. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
And also for two readings this evening, Mr. Mayor, bylaw 1957 to confirm the proceedings of this October 5th regular council meeting.
Mover, please. Counselor Verbeek and Counselor Bowman, all in favor. I need a motion to adjourn, please. Counselor Verbeek and Counselor Darren, all in favor. Have a nice evening, council. And thank you, administration.
Enjoy your vacay, Larry.
Have a fun and safe trip, Larry.
Thank you.